Okay, all right. So we got the notes. Proud to get the show sheet. Okay, we got Lateral Bot. Hey, could you go ahead and start the show real quick?
Beep boop. Rebooting the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.
Oh, you love to see it, man.
Yeets and greets, it's the Lateral Show with your hosts, Herms and McLateral. Beep boop.
Yeah!
It feels so good.
Dude, oh, check it out. Thank you so much, Lateral Bot, for finally working your way into the YouTube portion of this Lateral Show podcast, a sideways look at fantasy football thing that we do. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. His name is McLateral. Hello, what is up, my dude?
What is up is the Phillies are in the World Series. It feels so good. I am so excited. I'm also excited about the fact that we now are the ability to drop background music into our show. It is a welcome addition. And so on that note, I would like to get on my soapbox and propose to you a brand new theme song. I wrote the last one. I did not write this one, but I would argue it's even better. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, I've been told we can't do more than that.
Yeah, that's, I don't want to get flagged, but like, it'd be pretty cool.
It would be awesome. If there's any Fox executives that listen to the show, please give us the rights to that. We would like to drop it in every single segment. It's the best theme song. I get that there are other good ones. The CBS one is good. I think the Thursday Night Football, the NFL Network one, is underrated.
A little bit, yeah.
Weirdly, the ESPN one, good but overrated. Like, if you have to rank them, it kind of ends up towards the bottom.
I kind of get down with it, but I can definitely see where you're coming from with that for sure.
Again, it's like I'm not against it. It's just if I have to rank them, I think I rank it last.
Yeah, it definitely is an interesting hypothetical to consider, especially because in a world pre-Carrie Underwood doing her version, the "Are you ready for some football?" Like that. I kind of preferred that. I was a way bigger fan of "Are You Ready for Some Football?"
Yes. No, it's was it Faith Hill that's ripping off the Joan Jett song, correct?
No, it's Carrie Underwood.
Is it Carrie Underwood? Okay.
Yeah, it's Carrie Underwood. But at any rate, we have so many other things to discuss in the show. Just real quick off the top for the listeners / viewers.
The best version of the Sunday Night Football theme is definitely the Jane Litch Saturday Night Live sketch. If you have not seen it, you must watch it. It is amazing. I'm pretty sure Jason Sudeikis plays Chris Collinsworth, and it's fantastic from start to finish.
Well, definitely check that out after you finish watching this video, because we don't want you to leave this, or if you're listening to the podcast, don't pause this and go do it later.
Leave it running in the background at least. Get us the views, get us the likes,
exactly. Something like that. But of course, 100%. Look, I don't make the rules. That's how YouTube works. But at any rate, we got some interesting things to talk about on today's episode of the podcast, including just kind of catching up with some recent running back news. There have been a handful of trades, old faces and new places. And then later on, you're going to talk about some interesting running backs that people should really be paying a lot more attention to out on the waiver wire. We'll save, the details of that for you to explain later. But, so that's what we're going to talk about on my soapbox, I guess, before we get into anything else, since you had your fun with the new audio sound stuff that we got to test. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I just want to encourage anybody out there who also creates content as we do, or just, manages way too many leagues or whatever, that's kind of like feeling stressed out, burnt out, whatever, like it's just kind of that time of the year. We're approaching the midway point of the season. It is a little exhausting. I do completely understand people feeling a little bit burnt out, but we do all of this because we're passionate about it and because we like to try and help people and we like to have a good time. So whenever you do kind of get overwhelmed, and not even just about fantasy football stuff, but just generally in life, just sit back, take a deep breath, really assess why it is that you do some of the things you do. And just, if you can find some solace or some peace within that, absolutely go for it. That's a really great way to look at things. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, or just give up. Maybe fantasy football isn't for you, and that's okay. Wait, we decided that was the wrong message. That's the one we weren't going to send.
Oh, hold on. I'm hearing from the Lateral Bot says, no, we are not supposed to encourage people to give up. That is the antithesis of the point of the show, because this is
going to have to redo a lot of my show notes then.
Damn. All right. Well, in the meantime, you figure that out, and I can introduce my topic, which that was a really weird version of an air horn. The running back was carousel.
I love that we have background music set up enough that we can insert the NFL on Fox theme, but we cannot find an air horn.
That's true. So here, okay, I'll try and make it a little bit more intense. Introducing the next segment of the podcast. Are you ready? It's the running back news carousel. So it's the running back.
I thought we were supposed to cover last week's stories and do a recap first.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that part. Okay. All right. Well, you've gotten a really good hang of doing the fastest minute in fantasy football podcasts. Why don't you go ahead and do that? Do you want me to drop a beat? Make it more interesting?
Okay. I can't promise I'm going to rap to the beat or anything, but
you don't have to, but it'll be
a shot.
It'll a multi-sensory experience for everybody.
All right.
So here we go. Recap. Last week's show.
Okay, so we did wide receiver trade rumors. Claypool now rumored not to be traded. Elijah Moore may have a role again, but Breece Hall's out. Elijah Moore back with the team, expected to play week 8. So that takes care of Herm's side from last week. Now my side, talked about wide receiver sleeper targets. Alex Pierce fell off a bit. Paris Campbell somehow ascending, but the Colts just put in Sam Elringer? Can't remember how it's pronounced his last name, but I think I spelled it right. So who the hell knows? You shouldn't start any of the wide receivers not named Michael Pittman Jr. Wan'Dale Robinson was wide receiver 35 in PPR last week. He's looking to continue to get a role in the New York Giants offense. He was the top target of any Giants player with 8 targets last week. Hopefully you picked him up because it's probably too late now. And then, as we said last week, stash Robbie Anderson if you want to see if he hits this week, week 8, because we weren't expecting anything from him last week. He delivered on that. And if he doesn't hit this week, just cut him. You don't have to worry about it at all. And that is your recap.
Look at that. Oh,
solid.
Not only was it solid, but there were tunes. Look at us. See, Herms McLateral bringing new life to the podcast, trying to make this a better experience for you and for me and for everybody. I don't know. This is a huge dub for the planet Earth right now. Just 100%. This is the best thing that's ever happened. So now we move on. I don't know.
On that note,
I'm having myself a day. So we get to we get to move on to the recent kind of running back reshuffling throughout the NFL. So I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. We have not recorded a podcast since Christian McCaffrey was traded from the Carolina Panthers to your San Francisco 49ers, correct?
We have not. And that's why this week it's a week 8 running back rumble.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. So it just, I thought he did okay. I thought he did okay in his debut. Like, it was not expected that he was going to do a ton anyway. I think, even it was either the night of or the next morning, Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network had mentioned, he got the playbook on the plane. They were going to, scheme up a certain package for Christian McCaffrey. Nobody knew how big Christian McCaffrey's package would be. It's difficult because, when somebody's new, you don't know how big their package is going to be. So I get it.
I think Mrs. McCaffrey knew how big the package was going to be would go on.
Hey-oh! So, but 8 rushing attempts, 38 yards, and he caught a couple of passes for, like he did fine. He did fine. But the reason I kind of bring this up is because Elijah Mitchell is slowly working his way back. He will probably be back at some point soon. And I am curious, is Jeff Bell or Jeff Bell? Shout out the friend Jeff Bell on Twitter for whom J Bell tolls.
I don't think Jeff Bell will be a running back for the Niners.
That is
I know
true.
they're bringing in just about anyone off the street. At this point, I think they've got it covered.
And now that I mentioned Jeff Bell, check out the just check out all of his content over at Football Guys. He's a really great guy.
You have to do some of it, right? Like it's not out.
Yeah,
nowhere.
The Football Guys College Football Show. I am the
There
producer of the podcast that he co-hosts. Yes,
an organic plug.
Of course, 100%. So, okay.
Second best kind of plug.
Woo-hoo! Hey, bringing it back. Rewind.
Speaking of packages.
Jesus. So, is the question? Oh my God! The question now is the handcuff to Christian McCaffrey, Jeff Wilson Jr., or Elijah Mitchell upon his return. Now, keep in mind, we have not seen Elijah Mitchell since that just monsoon effort against Chicago in week 1. I want to say it was like knee ligaments, right? Like his right knee, something like that. Like he absolutely shredded some stuff, like sprained an MCL maybe. I don't know. But like that was almost 2 months ago. Like we're getting to the point where he will come back. But Jeff Wilson had performed admirably in the absence of Mitchell and prior to the arrival of Christian McCaffrey, to the point where, I mean, I get why the team made the deal that they did, because in the grand scheme of things, they didn't give up a ton of draft capital, but it could be argued they did not necessarily need the upgrade at running back. So I kind of lean Mitchell just because he had the job outright in the first place, and I think has looked better in his highlights over the course of his very young career than we have seen from Wilson. But that's not to take away from the talent of Wilson whatsoever. But I don't know. That's just my perspective. But this is also the team that you root for and follow more closely than I do. So if you're looking redraft or even dynasty purposes, handcuff for Christian McCaffrey, Jeff Wilson Jr., Elijah Mitchell.
So I think it's going to be a weird mix of the two potentially. So I think Elijah Mitchell's the more explosive runner. If you want someone to be taking a lion's share, if you want someone with a bit of burst, he is the kind of guy. Jeff Wilson does very well with the work that he's given, but he's not nearly as quick as Mitchell. But I think that Kyle Shanahan trusts him a lot. And so I can weirdly see him relying on Mitchell if CMC were to go down, which there's no indication, of course, that CMC is dealing with any injury that would cause him to go down. But if he were to go down, I don't know that they would go to a bell cow type situation with Mitchell or Wilson. I think they might decide to rotate the two, because I think they're going to end up rotating the two now that McCaffrey is the lead back. I could see, Jeff Wilson taking on almost a Mike Tolbert type of role. And then Elijah Mitchell, it's complicated because he's not quite the pass catcher, but he could almost take a JaMychal Hasty-esque role, just that quick change of pace out of the backfield. Not that Christian McCaffrey's slow by any means.
Of course, yes.
It's a little different. I think it certainly means that you don't need to have Hand of the King, Tyrion Davis Price on your roster anymore.
Yeah.
That we know for sure. And the Niners felt they didn't need to have Tevin Coleman on their rosters. He's now gone.
Happens to the best of us, man. Happens.
But Elijah Mitchell, so he's still got another week or two, I think, before he comes back.
Yeah.
Because I think it was projected as an 8-week injury. It's just like, if Elijah Mitchell ends up on your waivers, I would pick him up, is the short answer. But I don't know that he's guaranteed to take over a clear lead back role if CMC goes down.
I feel that, it's definitely worth considering regardless, especially because, like you said, there's no reason for us to believe that Christian McCaffrey would be hurt now. But over the last couple of years, and maybe to some degree it was just the Panthers being conservative with the guy that they were building their franchise around to some degree. But, he, between 2 years ago, it was like the shoulder issue.
Yeah.
And then I think it was a high ankle sprain or something. And then last year, hamstring. Last year was the hamstring. So, I guess you never know. It's a different circumstance, though, so I'm not going to make too many connections there.
Yeah.
But for context, just real quickly, Elijah Mitchell, 64% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and he is also, why did I go away from this page when I knew I was going to talk about it? On ESPN. Elijah Mitchell
was like 61, right?
61.2%. So there you go.
Yeah. So again, like I think if you have room on your bench, you need to have Elijah Mitchell. You need to have Jeff Wilson. I'm going to trust you to know whether your bench can handle having one or both of those guys, just in case. But I don't know that you can guarantee that either of them will automatically take over CMC's role.
Fair enough. And just from a dynasty perspective, I think if you are already the CMC manager in your league, it may behoove you to try and get one of those other people, perhaps, just in the same way that, a lot of people would have Madison, first names too, Alexander Madison, if you have Dalvin Cook, etc. But
so it's interesting. I'm almost the exact opposite. If I have CMC in Dynasty, I'm actually waiting for one breakout game in the Shanahan offense and then flipping him.
No, I mean that's another path. If you're somebody not actively contending right now, then yes, of course.
It's just like think about how highly rated he's been in that Panthers offense that wasn't very good. Like if people start to get the idea that he's going to be that good, but in a Shanahan offense, an offense that has been to a Super Bowl in recent memory, I think like a lot of people will want that. And I think you'll be able to get an incredible haul for CMC, an asset that I think was weirdly deflated prior to the trade.
There was definitely a buying window that has obviously slammed shut now, but it was there. You could definitely the lowest cost at any point in recent memory for the most part. I mean, I guess maybe while he was injured last year or something, but even then there was always hope. But it also does bring to question to some degree, assuming you're not a contender, because if you're a contender and you have CMC, you're just going to probably ride it out and go for the chip this year anyway. But in any other scenario, it brings to question, a lot of the reason why he was so productive for fantasy purposes in the past was that he was the Carolina Panthers offense. But now that he's arrived, and a lot of this analysis has already been done on other podcasts and stuff, I'm sure, but we, again, have not recorded a show since this took place. It does bring to question him, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. These are four individuals supremely talented that
loaded offense.
Yeah, in most circumstances, if they were individuals anywhere else, for the most part, would command a lot of work in targets and touches and whatnot in their respective offenses, but they're all in one place. I don't even know what to make, because it's one game. We can't really take too much away from one game of him barely knowing the playbook. But with as soon as Christian McCaffrey gets fully integrated in this offense, what do we think about any of them? Because this is very confusing.
So I'm still pretty bullish because as of right now, George Kittle, he had a bit of a rough start to the season, had some injuries, but he's scoring 11.4 points per game in PPR. He's not currently a top 12 tight end, but if you were to measure just by points per game, he would be in the top 6, I believe. Yeah, tight end 7. Tight end 7. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are both top 24 wide receivers right now. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver 11, Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 21. And then you have Jimmy Garoppolo even is playing well. He's only wide receiver 21 right now. But over the past 3 weeks, he was good enough to be a starting caliber quarterback. There's a reason he was featured in the Heat Check article, which you can check at fantasy6pack.net. Drops there every Saturday. A little organic plug. But seriously, that was weeks 4 to 6. Weeks 5 to 7, he's currently the QB7, 18.09 points per game. I mean, is it as good as Josh Allen's 31.26 points per game? No one's pretending it is. But is it good enough to potentially support 2 good wide receivers, a good tight end? Oh, and running back wise, Jeff Wilson Jr., RB24, and Christian McCaffrey, RB14 as a multi. Now, granted, most of those points coming on Carolina, but the point is still like this offense is good enough, is high powered enough that it can support people. The question is long term, can it support the same? Is CMC getting literally every touch? The answer is probably no. Yeah. But the answer is that the quality of opportunity might become better enough that it doesn't matter. But he's still an aging asset with a lot of tread worn off his tires.
Yes.
And so for me, I would take that one boom game unless I am truly contending. I'm in a similar situation with Nick Chubb, where I've just decided, look, I know what I think is fair for Nick Chubb. If I can't get that, this guy's like the RB1. I'm just going to ride with him. Like, there's no point selling, and I think I can contend for a championship in that league. You know, if I didn't, though, I'd like, move him. So, like, CMC would be amazing. I think if you could move him for someone who's deflated a bit, like Breece Hall, and maybe a draft pick or two, like, I would do that in a heartbeat if I wasn't contending.
Fair enough. And I'm glad you brought up Breece Hall, because that does transition nicely into the next topic we have. But just real quickly to kind of, I guess echo a lot of your sentiments. Just Jimmy Garoppolo is probably the biggest winner of the situation, non-Christian McCaffrey. And I talked about the Carolina backfield in the waiver wire video video/podcast that's already published, that you've probably already heard if you listen to every episode or watch every video for the show. But, something may give and cause somebody to lose touches. But to your point, if the offense is high-powered enough, with the amount of weapons that they have, with the competent level game manager of a Jimmy Garoppolo, it is feasible. Everything could be fine. So we will have to put a pin in the discussion of what it really means for the 49ers, at least for a little bit, once we get a bigger sample size. But to your Breece Hall points, it's good you brought it up, because he tore his ACL, which honestly,
good.
There is a whole huge discussion we could have about how to approach running back in Dynasty, but we just definitively do not have enough time to do that. Yeah. So we will just focus narrowly on what has happened in the time since. So the Jets lived in a post Breece Hall injury world of sadness for a brief period of time. Not too long, because
about a day.
Pretty much.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, like a day and a half, until they decided to say, fuck it, let's go replace him with James Robinson. So they call up Jacksonville, hey, bro, draft pick compensation. Peanut style phone call, because I don't know what the hell they were saying to each other. And now James Robinson shipped away from Jacksonville up to New Jersey to play with the Jets. I have a lot of thoughts on the whole thing, but in terms of what it means, in your opinion, for the Jets backfield now and what is left behind in Jacksonville, who is the bigger winner in this circumstance? James Robinson leaving, or Travis Etienne now inheriting?
It's Travis Etienne inheriting. Travis Etienne, from a fantasy perspective, Travis Etienne is the biggest winner of this whole thing. It's not close. Like, he is now going to get a bell cow role with his college quarterback, and he's already doing well. It's not even a question.
Yeah, and I kind of felt the same way. So I broke down some of the fantasy fallout for this over at Clutch Points, and since week 4, Etienne had already been out touching J-Rob to a ratio of 48 to 33. You know what I mean? So
there's a reason Jacksonville was willing to move on from him for not a ton, if we're being honest.
Yeah, because I think what was a 6th that could conditionally elevate to, yeah. So it's either a 5th or a 6th round pick, and the numbers bear out. Yes, it was a little bit of an interestingly and also frustratingly weird start for the ETN season, but we saw that they were scheming up some interesting touches for him, especially in week 1 against the Commanders. He got a lot of red zone looks, and then he grew into usurping James Robinson in the first place. So we know that the team kind of wanted to go in this direction anyway. Now he is uninhibited, to your point. And over his last 3 games played in PPR, he has averaged 15.4 points per game and is the RB18 in that window. Now, that was still with James Robinson, albeit in a diminished role, still there. I don't know that I'm going to necessarily put ETN rest of season in my weekly rankings inside my top 12, but he will be knocking on that door at like the highest end of RB2, particularly in PPR scoring, because he's not like a natural pass catcher per se, but he's decent enough at it, and they seem to be interested in giving him those touches to the point where, we talked all offseason about how excited the two of us were with his potential opportunity in the Doug Peterson offense, high pace, doing all of that. And it kind of stumbled at the starting line, but it has really paid off. So, people that were patient out there and didn't panic too much, like, you're being rewarded right now, because this is absolutely massive for ETN.
Yeah. I mean, right now, so over the past 5 weeks in PPR, I'm sorry, not past 5 weeks, week 5 to week 7, past 3 weeks, he's been the RB13, according to Fantasy Pros. So 15.4 points per game. And he's right below Joe Mixon. I think there are now a lot of similarities between those two players. They're not elite pass catchers, but they're good and they get some targets and they can run the ball quite well. And they're basically the person who runs the ball for their team.
Yeah. Oh, real quick, I will just say, I see the flaw in the stat that I cited, because fantasy data, the way that they sort, not to say anything mean about the site, because obviously it's a great resource.
They have different user interfaces.
So their whole thing is for trends, last 3 games played. I guess that also incorporates like the last 3 healthy games a player has played, and not necessarily the last 3 weeks per
Possibly.
se.
Possibly. So Derrick Henry is someone who has only played 2 games over that time period. Same with Dalvin Cook. So those are guys who could, and Dameon Pierce. So those are guys who could potentially vault over ETN in that situation.
But either way, like, the reason I mentioned it is because, like, us conveniently using these 2 resources does show an interesting ballpark range of what ETN's kind of range of outcomes is. Like, what did you say? 13? The number that I had was like 18 or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's about right.
Yeah, like a median projection there, something like that. Like, I think that's a reasonable expectation. So look at this happy coincidence we just stumbled ourselves into. That is absolutely wonderful, man.
I think the other thing that's really interesting, though, is so you have Breece Hall at RB6 over that same period.
Mm-hmm.
You have Michael Carter, RB23 over that same period. And you have James Robinson, checks notes kind of far down. Am I missing something? I feel like I must be missing something.
He's dwindled, bro. He really did. Like,
it's amazing. Like, oh yeah, here he is, RB57. So with James Robinson coming into New York, I know a lot of people are going to panic, Michael Carter wise. I'm still trying to get him and have him where I can. I'm not panicking. I think he will be the lead back in terms of work share in this running back by committee. The first down touch may technically go to the north-south runner that is James Robinson, but I think ultimately Michael Carter will be the more productive back.
Okay, so before I toss it back to you for a question of like kind of rest of season range of outcomes / rankings vibes, I do want to point out James Robinson did handle some pass catching responsibility over his last couple of years as the lead guy in Jacksonville, but that's not really a huge part of his skill set. The biggest thing that Michael Carter has going for him, regardless of what side of the work share he gets in some sort of like, 55-45 type situation, it remains to be seen, because like this is also just a really good time for me to conveniently sneak in the fact that I pulled up the stat in anticipation of this portion of the segments. We talked about this a lot in the past on this show. So far this year in the 2022 NFL season, there are 11 running backs that have a 66% or higher snap share. We talked about that all the time. The bell cow, we put the line somewhere around 2/3, and one of those guys that's on that list is Christian McCaffrey in a backfield that he abandoned. So if we take that away, just arbitrarily, because why not? That's 10 guys.
Yep.
That's Saquon Barkley. Just to run down the list very quickly. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Jonathan Taylor, Leonard Fournette, Devin Singletary, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, and Derrick Henry. And I omitted McCaffrey for the reason that I already explained. Those are the names. So this will very likely be some sort of interesting kind of, very close in nature type committee anyhow. So where was I? Yes. Okay. So Michael Carter last year in his rookie year, 2021, 29th among running backs in receptions with 36 and 15th in targets receiving 55. So just want to throw that out there, regardless of what end of even if he gets the quote unquote smaller share, that's maybe 42 to 45% or whatever the fuck it is. He's the pass catcher. It's in his skill set. We saw him do it at North Carolina when he was running in tandem with Javonte Williams. That's his thing. All of that understood, and everything that we've seen from James Robinson's ability to just do kind of the hammer role, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you valuing both of these players?
I'm definitely valuing Michael Carter higher. I think he is the one this team is a little more invested in. I think
and more familiar with, obviously.
Yeah, more familiar. I think he's the more dynamic running back of the two, even though James Robinson is the better downhill runner. And so for me, I just already this season, even with Breece Hall, Michael Carter finished in PPR scoring 14th in week 1, 22nd in week 2, 17th in week 5, and 31st last week. He's gotten 10 plus rushing attempts in games anyway. And now he'll be the lead back potentially. Not to mention, he gets a fair amount of receiving work, as you've mentioned. Now that's dwindled a little of late because Breece Hall is also very good and is able to catch the ball. But James Robinson doesn't have the same skill set as Breece Hall. So for me, Travis Etienne obviously way at the top.
Yeah.
Of these three. But then Michael Carter is definitely the second back I want of the three.
Yeah. And it is worth mentioning, just for the sake of having information to share about this backfield, in terms of, to your point about the receiving responsibilities that the Jets running backs hold just in the entirety of the offense. I talked about this in the article that I cited in our conversation last week about Elijah Moore and some of his struggles. According to 4 for 4, last year, Michael Carter and Ty Johnson, who kind of served as the RB1A to 1B, whatever, in that committee, seized a 19% target share. And with Hall this year, it was an increase of 5.4% to a 24.4% target share as recently as entering week 7, the game before the Hall injury went down. Robinson is competent enough to the point where we're not imagining the offense is going to change from a schematic standpoint by any means either. So just, it will probably largely remain the same, but to your point, advantage Carter potentially just because of the familiarity and the skill set that he already possesses and the shifting of the emphasis to giving the ball to the running backs in the offense. Anyway, in my write-up of the situation over at Clutch Points, I referred to Michael Carter as a flex consideration week to week and called James Robinson a low-end RB2 the rest of the way, which is basically the same thing in a vacuum, but I don't know. We're essentially on the same page there. That was interesting to talk about.
I think for me, I'd flip him. To me, Michael Carter's the low-end RB2 and James Robinson's the flex.
Fair, and it'll be incredibly interesting to see how that works out, particularly with guard Elijah Vera Tucker also probably going to miss the rest of the season. That's another big blow that people aren't really talking about enough, in my opinion. That offensive line did surpass expectation relative to what they were, thought of to be at the beginning of the year. So it's a pretty sizable blow.
And don't forget that Zach Wilson's still not a good quarterback.
He does suck.
Which is for people that have seen my issue with this Jets trade, my issue isn't that James Robinson isn't good. He's good. my issue isn't that, like, to get a player of James Robinson's caliber, you'd give up a 5th round pick. That's actually probably pretty fair. My issue is the Jets are doing it, and the Jets aren't going to win their division. They still have Zach Wilson as a quarterback, and so they've just given up a 5th round pick for a rental that isn't going to make a difference. And that is my qualm with the pick. Luckily, Michael Carter has managed to survive Zach Wilson for the most part, so I have my fingers crossed that he'll continue to do so.
All right. So before I finally manage to shut the fuck up and let you actually talk about the thing that you brought to the table, I will say, as bad as Zach Wilson is, and as much as it is, unlikely that they're going to win their division, 4-game winning streak ain't nothing. Sure. Somehow, they've found ways to insulate the shittiness of Zach Wilson to the point where I get why they did it, and I'm not necessarily in a position where I feel comfortable making a definitive statement one way or another, but it is within the realm of possibility that they could conceivably be in the wild card hunt by the time we talk about this a month from now. So sure. I at least understand why they took the shot on the rental. That's just I know we kind of differ a little bit on that, but at least we both agree Zach Wilson's horrible.
I think it's not that I don't get why they took the shot. I think it's a mistake that they took the shot. There's a difference. I get why the Jets' internal mindset is like, let's take the shot. I'm saying as an objective outsider, as an observer, it was a mistake because it won't pay off.
All right, fair enough. And hey, it remains to be seen.
By the way, the Jets' 4-game winning streak, they're also 4-0 on the road. Not sure how sustainable that is. And then you look at the Bills, who only have 1 loss, and the Dolphins, who are 3-1 at home. And I just feel a little more confident in their staying power.
And one of those wins was against my Pittsburgh Steelers, who are genuinely horrible. So okay. I don't have the emotional bandwidth to talk about that. I will finally shut my pie hole, and we will get to the portion, because you brought to the table a very interesting thing to talk about, because this is just, it's a preface briefly in a vague sense, because this is your thing and not mine. A range of players on waivers that are very impactful, but could be, but just like perpetually overlooked. And it is kind of a shame.
Yeah. So the way I would describe it is these are the next man up RBs who, by the time you're listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube, they will still be available because they are getting overlooked, as you say. And so an example of this is Donta Foreman to the Carolina Panthers, running back. So Chuba Hubbard was named as a starter in week 7. He looked good. 9 attempts for 63 yards, had a touchdown on the ground, 2 receptions, 3 targets. All good stats. Gets injured. Donta Foreman takes over and makes those stats look meaningless by comparison. He goes 15 for 118, catches both his targets for 27 yards. I think people are going to panic drop him. He's already barely at 50% rostership in ESPN.
I can check.
I think Yahoo. 50% in Yahoo and then 35% in ESPN, I believe, are the numbers. And so
that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's insane. Like, I can't believe everyone didn't already scoop him up. So not only did everyone not already scoop him up, but like, he's probably going to get panic dropped by some people who expect Chuba Hubbard to take over. Chuba Hubbard took an ankle injury. Now they say he'll be fine. They say he'll play next week. Then I do expect him to play this week. But there's a chance he re-aggravates that. And there's a chance that Steve Wilkes, who has nothing to lose, I mean, nothing to lose, everything to win. He's already named PJ Walker as starter for the rest of the season, barring a dip in performance by Walker.
Like,
there's no reason that he won't just turn to Donta Foreman, who has looked good in his last several opportunities to be a running back for a team.
Yeah.
So I would stash him. I think everyone should, scoop him up. I am giving up 0 of my shares. I scooped him up everywhere I could. Last week when the McCaffrey news broke, I think he wins this backfield come the fantasy playoffs, even if Chuba Hubbard stays healthy. And there's no guarantee that Chuba Hubbard stays healthy.
Yeah. And even though waivers will have already run in many leagues by the time that this show comes out, like, it is still incredibly important that we note this, because I tried to tell people in the waiver column, which if you want the full access to behind the paywall, you go to fantasysixpack.net/plans to access. Like I wouldn't be overly confident if I am the person who picked up Chuba Hubbard over Deontay Foreman off of waivers in hopes of supplementing some sort of running back value on my team. I don't think that he is necessarily going to provide any sort of stability, which, like, I don't know. My point being, it's important that we continue to plant our flag in Deontay Foreman's probably the better option in this backfield because people are and have already kind of put that in doubt.
Yeah. Absolutely. If Chuba Hubbard is available, he's probably worth a pickup. But the other point of this is to focus on guys who will likely be available by the time you listen to this, which will be after waivers run. So that's why I am focusing on these particular guys, because I do feel confident they will be available in less than 50% of leagues. That being said, while I think picking up Chuba Hubbard is a solid idea if he is available, I actually do advocate picking up Donta Foreman instead if both are available.
Yes,
so
I would
make sure you get that part of it as well. Another guy who could be a solid pickup is Latavius Murray for the Denver Broncos. Mike Boone is now on IR, so that is a guaranteed 4-game absence due to an ankle injury. This backfield is now Melvin Gordon III, who has been benched for Murray once already by an incompetent coaching staff in week 5 at Indianapolis, and Murray. I'm not particularly worried about Marlon Mack taking meaningful reps from either of them. There's a reason he's just coming up off the practice squad. We know Javonte is not coming back. We know Boone is now not coming back for a while. And Gordon, even getting his job back, has not looked particularly special. So I think Latavius Murray, will he be lights out? Maybe not. But if you're someone that's looking for a 0 RB, RB2, a flex guy, or just a valuable handcuff to have, because at the moment, I think if Melvin Gordon were to go down, Melvin Gordon and Latavius Murray doesn't suddenly become Latavius Murray and Marlon Mack. I think it largely becomes Latavius Murray.
Yes, I would agree.
For these reasons, I think he is a good guy to pick up. The other thing I would say is I didn't necessarily plan it out this way when I wrote this list, but I believe that the order I'm about to go in is also the order that I would prioritize these guys. I would definitely prioritize Donta Foreman over any of them. And I think I would prioritize Latavius Murray over the next guy, Keontae Ingram, specifically because I don't necessarily believe in Melvin Gordon's ability to continue to perform at an NFL starter level. So before I move on to Ingram, do you have any additional thoughts on Murray?
He has managed over the course of several seasons, dating back to I believe 2014.
Yeah, it's been a while.
To just find a way. And we talked about this before we even started recording as well. One of the most fascinating things about him is that he does not wow anybody. But he is huge, and he is just extremely good at the fundamental aspects of playing the position of running back. Now, I mean, you obviously, for as long as we've known each other, my older brother, shout out Nick, he doesn't follow football nearly as closely as we do, but he follows the NFL in the same way that I follow the NBA, to the point where if you're good, I'm aware of who you are.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to be only star level players, even lower below the surface. If you're good and people talk about you, I know who you are. Latavius Murray is that person for Nick. And he's he's just because anytime he's on the screen or whatever, he's just oh shit, is that Latavius Murray? Even he recognizes, as someone who doesn't follow football that closely because of just how fundamentally sound and also just huge he is. It's amazing.
Wildly efficient.
Yes.
Do you know the last time that Latavius Murray had less than 4 yards per carry? This is 2017.
Yeah.
First year with the Vikings, when he had 3.9 yards per carry. It's the only time he's had less than 4 yards per carry. He was off by 0.1 yard per attempt. He had a 1,000-yard season with the Raiders.
Yeah.
In 2015. Like, this guy has had multiple 200-plus attempt seasons. He's had multiple 6-plus rushing touchdown seasons. I mean, even last season, he fills in for the Ravens. I want to say, like, it says 14 games here. I don't remember it quite working out that way. I guess he maybe got a touch in some of them.
Yeah.
But, like, 119 rushing attempts, 500 yards, and 6 touchdowns, like, is kind of like a rotation piece. There's no reason he can't put out similar numbers in Denver. And last year in Baltimore, he was good enough to win you some weeks. Or not win you the weeks, at least help you win the weeks. And sometimes that's all you're looking for, especially from a guy who, when you hear this, you will probably still be able to go out and get.
I get that fantasy enthusiasts, particularly in the dynasty landscape, but this does bleed over into redraft. You know, like older running backs are not exactly in vogue ever, especially with the evolution of, you know, commonplace strategy that exists within playing this game. But guys like this are just like, they're just good, man. Like, they're just good. At minimum, you know, like, even if he doesn't pop off, he possesses the ability to pop off definitively, which makes a Latavius Murray so much more different. Which, and honestly, in the first place, why I was hesitant to even pick up Mike Boone after, like, in the aftermath of the Javonte injury anyway, because, like, once I saw, like, oh, they got Murray off the Saints practice squad. Okay, well, we know a guy like Latavius Murray can do that. A guy like a Mike Boone, or just like some rando that tested really well at the combine that went undrafted that we fall in love with because of analytics darlings and whatnot. Like, there's a clear difference between players like that and players like this.
Well, and so, like, that's also the thing. Like, Latavius Murray, like, yes, he's old. He's 32, but, like, we've seen him do it this season already. We've seen him do it for more than one team.
Like, yeah, what is it, like 4 or 5 now?
But no, I mean, this season.
That is also true.
Yeah, like, this season we've seen him do it for, like, in week 4 against Minnesota, which I believe is on the Saints. Correct me if I'm wrong.
On the Saints, and a revenge game, which is also fun.
RB17 in standard. For PPR, you know, a little lower, RB20, but, like, since then, he then went to a whole nother team and hasn't finished lower than RB30 in PPR scoring. So for me, I'm just like, man, it's not flashy, but, like, there were plenty of people last year, and if you listen to people who advocate 0 RB, which I don't necessarily advocate 0, I don't specifically advocate 0 RB. If that's how your roster happens to construct itself, then great. If it's not, also great. But, like, people rode guys like Tony Pollard to a championship game or a championship.
You did
that. I did. Like, Latavius Murray is a similar level of production where it's just like, this guy could just be enough to fill that hole in your roster. And, like, maybe you have no second running back. Maybe your Breece Hall went down.
Yeah.
But you still have Justin Jefferson and Chris Olave and Deontay Johnson and Brandon Ayuk, and you're fine at wide receiver. And so you just need someone that can, like, slot in at that RB2. I'm not talking about any specific.
This sounds like a very
hypothetical situation, and definitely not my team in our home league. But seriously, like, Latavius Murray is a guy who I feel confident can fill in at, like, flex level production, which I consider to be RB3 or wide receiver 4.
I'm here for that, man. I'm absolutely here for that, dude. Like, he's just so safe. And I borrow this phrase all the time. Herms is a huge proponent of, occasionally, situationally, when it makes sense, the old under oath strategy of sometimes you're only chasing safety. You know, you just have to. I understand from, like, a range of outcomes, you know, fancy, weird portfolio version of, like, the, I don't know, what do they call that? Like the economics bros that, you know, infiltrated sports. Like, when you're looking at, well, particularly like on a dynasty roster, like, yes, you turn the bottom of the bench with, like, these high upside things or whatever to see, you know, theoretically if you can hit the lottery in one hits. But like, to reiterate a point that I already made and that you have also helped to support, like, guys like this are just important. They just are.
It's not a guarantee that Latavius Murray can't be a lottery ticket. Like, he could replace Melvin Gordon as the starter in this team.
Like, if between the fumbling issues and the fact that, and I've written, it's either an article or two in my time with my new job, like kind of the weird situation between like he and Hackett only speaking after that. It was after that Monday night game, when he was inexplicably taken out in the second half. Like, they didn't even bother addressing that situation.
There's no love there.
Yeah, like not even after the game. The next day after the game, they didn't even talk and have a sit-down meeting of the minds about it. Like, we don't know Melvin Gordon's future with this team at all. So, yeah, I don't know.
But if you want more of a lottery ticket option, if you want something younger, Keontae Ingram will probably be available for you off waivers, running back for the Arizona Cardinals. Eno Benjamin stole the show this week. But if you actually look at the stats, Ingram only saw like 6 less opportunities. You saw like 3 less rushing attempts, 3 less targets, which like is not nothing. But it does show that he's probably beaten out Darrell Williams, who had no rushing attempts and no targets.
Yeah.
This is your 2 RB setup in Arizona now. It's Eno Benjamin and Keontae Ingram until James Conner comes back. And so, that's potentially viable in a similar manner of how Latavius Murray is potentially viable as the second running back. And B, if Eno Benjamin goes down, this is Ingram's backfield. Like, that's it. That is who will be the bell cow running back for this Cardinals team. So he is a clear, if I'm a like 0 RB roster build, he's like a guy I'm absolutely targeting to be that RB2, that Tony Pollard type, where it's like he makes some interesting plays. He gets enough volume to potentially get you the points. But man, if he gets the opportunity to look out, this guy could be like a clear RB1 candidate. And I do think that if we were to have a game where Eno Benjamin had to be out and James Conner was not back, Keontae Ingram could very well be projected as a top 12 running back in a way that I don't think we'd quite say the same about Latavius Murray. As like reliable as he is, I think there is like a little bit extra with Ingram and a little bit extra with that Cardinals offense that I would, have him a little higher there. But his floor is also noticeably lower, which is why I think ultimately I have him just lower in priority than Latavius Murray.
And like, I don't necessarily share the same level of high-end optimism as you do per se, but I'm very close, and there is a reason why Keontae Ingram is on a number of my taxi squads in dynasty leagues, because even though his career as a USC Trojan in college was not particularly remarkable, he did produce very solid numbers. And coming from a program that produces competent running backs at a minimum, and also just displaying largely prototypical skills, I don't know that he necessarily stands out in any particular facet of being a running back, but overall is just very solid at everything you kind of need to do, akin to a Latavius Murray, but to perhaps a lesser degree, maybe just because we haven't seen enough from him. But like I said, there's a reason he's stashed on a lot of my dynasty rosters. In deeper redraft leagues, there is definitely room for that, for sure. I'm with you 100%. He looked good. He did look good.
I think another reason I would put Ingram a little behind Murray is I think Murray, while I don't know that he has quite the same single game upside that Ingram does, Murray is more likely to completely take over his backfield. Whereas I think, if we were to see Eno Benjamin go down with an injury, but then expected him back the next week, he would probably take that lead role back over the next week if he was healthy enough to do so.
Not only that, but I mean, like in redraft season, or at least the very early parts of it, or at least around like rookie draft season for dynasty folks out there, like one of the appealing things about Ingram was the fact that like he could be the RB2 behind James Conner, but Eno Benjamin performed really well. Yeah. He seized that job. So even just by virtue of that alone, and the fact that he didn't outright win the number 2 role, there is still somebody in place, not just because of the current circumstances, but also just everything that we understood from the preseason. Like there's stuff standing in front of him. So yeah.
Yep.
I'm with you.
Last guy on the list is Deion Jackson, a name that's probably familiar to a lot of people because he was the RB1 in week 6 with just a phenomenal performance against the Jaguars. So Jackson is nothing more than a handcuff with Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines back. But he showed fantasy viability when stepping in for Taylor with that RB1 finish week 6 against the Jags and RB25 finish week 5 against Denver in what was a slog of a game. So if Taylor re-aggravates his ankle injury, Jackson becomes a top waiver ad. So if you're in very deep leagues, I would just say just add him now instead of waiting. So this is a guy that will not pay off this week, like full stop. And that is why he will be available on a lot of your waiver wires. And so that is why, again, if you were in a deeper league, you should go and pick him up. I think there's a lot worse handcuffs that you could get at this point. But that's why he's clearly behind the other 3 guys that I've mentioned.
And to kind of weirdly on the fly tie a interesting bow from the thing that we started this portion of the show with me talking about and you here with Sam Ehlinger being named the starter, Matt Ryan going to the bench. We had talked a little bit earlier about in Christian McCaffrey's time in Carolina, the team just being outrageously cautious and holding him out of what were largely meaningless games because why would you risk re-injuring this guy? Do you think that there is a chance that if Jonathan Taylor re-aggravates any sort of ailment that he has already dealt with, that they could keep him out akin to a Christian McCaffrey and just ride Deion Jackson? I think that chance is non-zero. I really, really do.
Yeah, I would agree. Ehlinger, that's it. I knew I had it slightly off. I just didn't know how I had it slightly off. Okay, yes. So with Ehlinger now being the future, it seems, at least for this season, it's all record dependent, but there's definitely a non-zero chance that they shut Jonathan Taylor down if he re-aggravates something.
Yeah.
I would put it 15% right now, but with every loss, it goes up probably another 10%.
Yeah. And also just for context, I'm not going to go into the full details of it because it's incredibly fucking boring, but I did write up about it over at Clutch Points today. Basically, what incentivizes the Colts to sit Matt Ryan out is because of language in his contract for guaranteed money. If he fails a physical in March around the new league year, he would get a $7 million bonus on top of an existing other trigger that could possibly be $10 million. So in total, what they're really doing is benching him to make sure that he passes a physical next spring so they don't have to pay him $17 million on top of his $12 million base salary. That's what the Colts are doing. So Ryan's not coming back.
They're not going to be able to move on from him.
And it will be cheaper for them to keep him as the veteran wily backup.
Yeah.
At a $12 million clip than it would be for I'm bad at math, but whatever 12 plus 17 is, because that's a shit ton of money.
20.
So there you go. See, there's a reason I got into writing. Okay. There's a reason I got into writing. But yeah, man, and just real quick before. So I have one guy that I want to briefly mention just because I have to. And then I have a hypothetical that I want to pose to you before we move on. So the guy I want to mention that it fits into this category, but again, also ties into a conversation that we had near and dear to my heart, JaMycal Hasty. Okay. Look, and I'm not wrong, with James Robinson gone, we know that when Hasty has had opportunity in his career, he's done okay. But particularly in this type of offensive system that I think works really well with his skill set, he's the guy behind Travis Etienne. Snoop Connor's not interesting to me at all. And we've already seen, albeit one highlight play, but it was one really good. I think it was a 61-yard touchdown run. We've seen Hasty do some interesting stuff.
Yes, 61-yard touchdown run.
So, dynasty people out there, this is a non-factor for redraft leagues. Unless you're in the deepest of a 16-team league, that's the only instance in which this matters for redraft. But dynasty people out there, if JaMycal Hasty is available, he is worth a speculative stash just because he's behind Etienne now. And then
he's available in our dynasty league, right?
I know, and I put in a bid.
There
Well, I got to keep it on brand. So with the whole Deion Jackson interesting thing, because I think he's done well enough to establish himself just as like the Colts have no incentive to seek a backup now.
I would agree.
They found the guy. Deion Jackson versus a Jamal Williams and Alexander Madison. Has he entered that type of conversation?
He's knocking on their door.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's like just below, because I think if Naheem Hines is healthy, he remains just enough of an annoyance to Deion Jackson's production that guys like Madison just don't have to worry about.
That's fair. That's fair.
But that's why. That is why I'm saying he's not in the house. He's not in the room, but he's given a knock on the door and he's seeing if anyone's answering.
Fair enough. I just mentioned it because of all the names that we mentioned, I would say just due to circumstance, individual performance, and the player that he is behind.
Yes, as a handcuff strictly, he probably is the highest upside. I would say that like Deonta Foreman is probably closer than we think, but yes.
All right, so there you go. Pretty cool. I'm really glad we got to dive into that, because that was like, these are the important things. Because kind of like I said to, crudely introduce the topic, there's the handcuffs we're already familiar with that are already widely rostered. And then there's the guys deep below, like, sure, I guess if anything happened to Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren is kind of interesting, but there's not a lot of indication for growth. At least with these players that we've talked about, there is room for growth, tangible growth, and they are not the Jamal Williams, the Khalil Herbert, the Alexander Madison, the Tony Pollard that's already gone. So if you're looking for that type of investment, these are the players that we would both co-sign and recommend.
Yep.
And then before we get into the boom bust portion of the show here at the end, I just want to say, if you like prop picks and stuff, you can sign up with the promo code Herms on Thrive Fantasy, and it'll match your first deposit up to $100. So if you put down 20, they will match and they will give you 40. If you put down 25, they will match and give you 50. But if you put in $101, they will not match that. It is up to $100. You cannot exceed that amount and then have them match, but anything
so if you put in 101, will they just match up to the 100 and then not match the additional one, or will they go, you didn't listen and you get nothing?
I'm gonna have to talk to the.
Nobody thinks these things through.
That's fair. I will reach out to the employee of the company that I'm in contact with about that detail. But at any rate, use promo code Herms on Thrive Fantasy. That's just a thing that you can do. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and just hog the beginning of this, at least, just because I am pretty firm in what my boom pick of the week is, because A, it's incredibly obvious, and B, I just want to make a larger point about something. I'm once again using this segment to shoehorn a point that's not about making a prediction.
Mm-hmm.
I get that people are, especially fantasy diehards, are growing tired of playing in a league with a kicker and a DST and doing shit like that, whatever. But the vast majority of the fantasy football population plays with these settings. They do. You and I both do. The leagues we care about the most.
Way to play.
Yeah. Is it cool to be in super flex leagues with 3 wide receivers and 2 additional flex spots and all that shit? Like, sure, it's fun. It's a different version of the game. I enjoy that version of strategy, but the classic game is a very fun thing. And when you have a DST that is so dominant and so good, you don't drop them when their bye week shows up. And I know this is coming out after waivers have already run. The really sharp people out there have probably already figured this out. But if the Philadelphia Eagles DST was dropped in your league, Jesus Christ, exhaust any reasonable option you have to go pick that up. Because if you look at the remainder of their schedule, dear God, is it going to be a cakewalk? Not only do they get to feast on the immaturity of my beloved Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 8, but they follow that up with the game in Week 9 against Houston, Week 10 against Taylor Heineke and the Washington Commanders, and Week 11 against Sam Ellinger and the Indianapolis Colts we just got finished talking about. So for the next month, you're probably looking at like the best DST, which was already, if I remember correctly, the fourth highest scoring unit entering their bye week. So they shouldn't have been dropped in the first place. Just if you're playing in a league with DSTs, don't drop the really elite ones when they're on their bye. Just quit doing it.
not only that, but like, will the Eagles lose a game? Yes. Will it somehow beat Week 10 against Washington? Probably. However, if you look at the schedule, they should be favored to win every game but away at New York. Maybe away at Dallas if Dallas continues to win as well.
Yeah. I mean, like,
that's it. There is a reasonable path to this team to finish 17-0. Again, will they? No. They will find a way to lose somewhere, somehow. It'll be an off week. You know, this happens in the NFL. Like, the Bills are clearly an elite team. They already have a loss. These things happen. But if you look at the schedule, it is incredibly tasty.
Yeah, dude, I was really hyped about that unit entering the season. I talked about it a lot on this podcast.
I remember.
When I put in my official picks on the Fantasy Pros website for my preseason, you know, like sleeper, whatever, like, and the results of that will come out at the end of the year at some point. But you can only pick one sleeper defense. And I picked the Eagles because I thought it was pretty obvious the entire goddamn time. So I got that. And then, so that's my boom. You know, I mean, they're the second highest projected scoring DST. So, I mean, like, whatever. They'll probably exceed that total anyway, just because they're super good. And like I said, it's Kenny Pickett, who I don't have the emotional bandwidth to talk about, as I shared earlier. But as far as a bust goes, I don't know that I have a particularly great candidate, but I will say at some point, something kind of has to give in terms of the Packers offense and being able to get a little bit more creative with what they're doing in the backfield, especially with A.J. Dillon kind of struggling with the responsibility that they've given him, in accompaniment with the fact that they're traveling on the road to play the Bills on Sunday Night Football. I'm a little nervous about Aaron Jones. I just am.
Yeah.
You know, like, at his best this season, he's been an absolute monster, but he has kind of, you know, crawled up into his shell at times. And even though the Fantasy Pros PPR projection sits him at 14.2, theoretically, a guy like Aaron Jones that we've seen produce in the past could do that, but he has gone under that total, count them 1, 2, 3, 4 times already in 7 games played. It's
truly weird that A.J. Dillon is not getting any opportunity. The guy is averaging, I believe, a fair amount over 3.5 yards per carry. Like, it's not like a fumbling issue either. The guy has literally 0 fumbles this season.
Yeah.
Not one. In fact, he's recovered one that he didn't even cause. Like, I don't understand why this team is just not giving him the opportunities to succeed, but still giving him opportunity. It's so weird.
It's like we talked so much about, like, in our prediction for what the offense was going to be this year, that it would stand to reason they would build around the strengths of their weapons, and their 2 biggest and strongest weapons were in the backfield. But they insist on trying to find odd ways to integrate, because honestly, beyond certain flashes from Alan Lazard, and, you know, no, I'm not taking anything away from what Romeo Doubs has been doing, but they're not figuring it out through the air.
No,
they're
and
not.
so like the thing I don't get is like they play New England, a tough team.
Mm-hmm.
They give him 17 rushing attempts. He goes for 4.29 yards per carry. He catches 1 or 2 targets and takes it for 11 yards, just like a decent sized play, and is on the field for 58% of the snaps. This all seems good. That is good production. It is what you'd want for your running back.
That's a
so
flex.
They reward him the next week, which ends up being a loss, by only giving him 6 rushing attempts, which he still does well with. He still runs for 5.67 yards per attempt in that game. And they only give him a 32% snap share, and they give him no targets.
And against the Giants unit that is less difficult than the Patriots front.
Yeah. And then the next week, they give him 10 rushing attempts. They give him the start. He gets 4.1 yards per attempt, which we all consider to be pretty good.
Pretty good.
Not like elite necessarily, but like pretty good, genuinely.
Yeah.
4 for 6 on his targets, 11 yards. Not great, sure, but he's catching the ball. Again, no fumbles. He's on the field for nearly half the snaps. The next week, they reward him by only giving him 4 rushing attempts and 0 targets and only 30% of the snaps. It doesn't make any logical sense.
And it was an ugly game against the Commanders too. They made very little adjustments to find a way to, and I guess in a negative game script or somewhat neutral leaning toward negative, you maybe don't want to lean on a player like him necessarily, but like sure. He is electric and to your point has done well when given the opportunity. It stood to reason they should have integrated him more.
Again, if like he's got fumble issues, if he's being an inefficient runner, if he's dropping all of his targets, like I can see that all being reasons to give him less opportunity. But he's not doing that at all. I mean, like the catch rate's been hit or miss a couple games, but like aside from that, and that's no reason to just slam the brakes on a guy.
Yeah.
Especially anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to your boom bust picks.
Yeah. In case Sarah, right? It's a tight end edition of boom bust here. My boom pick is Greg Dulcich, who is the starting tight end for the Denver Broncos. I will hear none of this Albert O nonsense. I will hear none of it at all because Greg Dulcich is the future of this Broncos team at the tight end position. He's projected to finish as just tight end 16 this week with 7.9 points. He saw 9 targets last week. It was the second most of anyone in the Broncos versus Jets game, admittedly second most for the Broncos as well because Jerry Jeudy out-targeted him. But he's been tight end 7 in PPR leagues since coming into the league in week 6. He was drafted with 3rd-round draft capital, as I remember correctly.
I believe so,
this team does want to use him. I think he should be rostered in pretty much every league. Like if you're looking for a tight end, your tight end is here.
Dude, with how shitty tight end is, I mean, honestly, like, because like I told you before we started recording, I picked him up everywhere.
Yeah.
And the only league I subsequently dropped him in was just because of the fact that Pat Freiermuth was dropped in a corresponding move by a different manager. But like, just looking at tight end on the year so far, just in terms of the points per game leaders, like we don't have that many guys getting into double digits, man.
We really don't.
We don't, like, by my count here. And like I said, I'm doing this based off of points per game.
Yes, not points overall.
We got, so Dulcich being 1, and then George Kittle being another, and then everybody in the top 10. So that is 13 that I'm not going to name all of them, but that's 13 tight ends that are averaging double-digit points per game so far on the season, Dulcich being one of them. It's 2 games, but he's doing it.
Honestly, some of those guys you might feel confident starting Dulcich over. Like, I think I would start Dulcich over Tyler Higbee. I think I would start Dulcich over Taysom Hill.
And if you have David Njoku, he's a little bit banged up. It's not guaranteed he's going to play this week. If you're looking for an option, there you go. Somebody that you could stream while you wait for Njoku to get healthy.
The one guy, weirdly, who, like, it's interesting that he's only at 9.9s per game. I still kind of would start Gerald Everett over him. I like what Gerald Everett has done. I think he's weighed down by like a really bad week 5.
This has historically been a pro Gerald Everett podcast.
But I think week 5 is a weird aberration. If you look at Gerald Everett's season, he had 4 targets in week 1, but then 10, 6, 6, 3 in week 5, 7, 9. And I'm just like, you know what? I think I would still roll with him. But barring those guys that we've talked about, like Dulcich, you should start over anyone else.
Yeah, man. It's true. And also just a quick thing about Everett. Like, don't quote me on this because I haven't looked at this information in a very long time, but it was for an article that I wrote about over the summer. Old man Jared Cook in his couple of seasons with the Chargers, I dug through and looked some stuff
solid.
Up. Tight end 18 in PPR in that time, if I remember correctly. So that's old man Jared Cook in that system. Like there's
some games where he surprisingly flashed things.
Yeah, and just adjusting for age and all of that stuff, and maybe even I don't want to disrespect Jared Cook necessarily, but maybe perhaps for talent, Gerald Everett is objectively better. So, but either way, point stands. Like, yeah,
I mean, last year Jared Cook at age 34 put up 48 receptions on 83 targets. This Chargers offense feeds the tight end.
It does.
So the offense that doesn't feed the tight end, though, and this is my bust pick, and I think we're all ready for it. It's Kyle Pitts. Tight end 9.4 points. Carolina is not particularly a good matchup. It's the 22nd best matchup for opposing tight ends. And Pitts has been given nothing to work with. He's doing the most. He's kind of like A.J. Dillon, where he's doing the most with what he's getting, but it's just not enough. You shouldn't start him. Marcus Mariota had literally... I think what the kids are saying is my brother in Christ. Marcus Mariota had literally 13 pass attempts last week. Like, if you thought your Lamar Jackson week with 16 pass attempts was bad, buddy, let me sell you on Marcus Mariota with just 13 pass attempts and 8 completions. Like, I'm good. I still believe in the talent that is Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is showing us that we should still believe in the talent that is Kyle Pitts. I just don't know that we should believe in the talent that is Arthur Smith, and I've decided not to.
And I will also quickly point out that even if Kyle Pitts had crossed the plane on that catch and scored a touchdown, he still would not have put up really that many points in the grand scheme of things this past week. So, like, I think people will point at that as a refrain to give hope, but that's one little instance in what has been a bullshit offensive design. Because, again, something we talked about, before recording, a joke that I made in a comment section of another live stream that I was watching. The Falcons coaching staff this year is just like, other coaches, we lose them, bro. Arthur Smith, have we tried running the ball? Like, that's the fucking solution. Like, I don't, you spend back-to-back top 5 picks, if I remember correctly, if not top 10, on Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and you're like, let's give Tyler Algier and Caleb Huntley a shit ton of volume. Like, that's your plan. That's your plan. Like you said, 13 passing attempts. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah. It's not great, Bob.
Not at all. Not at all. But you know what was great? This edition of the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football. That's what was great. That is what was great.
This is true.
I'm glad we got to integrate all the fun sounds. We will probably have more chiming in from the Lateral Bot as time goes along. Still kind of working on tweaking the algorithm there. But until that time, and until you hear from us again, my name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. I'm an associate NFL editor over at ClutchPoints.com. If you want to read all of my coverage about the NFL and the latest news going on, I got you covered there. If you want to read some of my fantasy football stuff, you can find that Fantasy Six-Pack. I wear the hat every time we do a show for the most part. The logo's on the screen. It's on the YouTube channel that you're watching this video on if you're watching it. And if you want to get my premium stuff behind the paywall, once again, fantasysixpack.net/plans. And that's where I'm at. So where can they find you on the interwebs?
Well, last week, I want to apologize for this. We missed Eats and Greets. We missed the season of the eating. And so rest assured, the season of the eating remains, and Eats and Greets to one and all, because it's your boy McLateral, aka McLateral FF on the Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at McLateral FF or at MacMcMillan ATL, which is my main account. McLateral FF for the fantasy football stuff, and Mac McMillan for everything else. If you want, you can also check out Tom's Guide, which is my day job. That's where I do most of my writing at this point. I just reviewed an e-bike, which was a lot of fun, and rode it to work every day for a week. So you can go over there, check out the Riding a Bike Every Day for a Week article now, and then later this week, the review should be up for that same bike. So that was a lot of fun. And you can also go to Fantasy Six Pack and check out the Heat Check, which comes out every Saturday. This past one was interesting because let me tell you, the Heat Check has been a little difficult this season. Basically, we don't get to write about RBs at the Heat Check. There is no running back talk whatsoever. I had to get it all out of my system this week. So we'll see how that goes going forward. But for now, I think that is everything from me. So I'll leave it at that. Phillies in the World Series. Let's fucking go.
There you go. Shout out the Phillies. Shout out all the lateral heads out there. Shout out the six packers. Until next time.